Hello, trumpet players and jazz players. Today we're going to talk about why it's so important for you to learn how to transpose. I was telling a student the other day, one of my adult students, I was telling him that getting students to transpose was like pulling teeth. And you can kind of understand that because by the time you're ready to transpose, you're pretty good, right? There's things that you're doing that are at a higher level than just beginner, right? And when you start trying to transpose, it's a humbling experience to say the least. You go back to what it was like when you were in beginner band and you don't know how to play the notes. And nobody wants to do that because it's kind of a shot to the ego, so to speak, right? But it's crucially important. If you want to be a great jazz player, you gotta be able to transpose. It's an essential part of what it means to be a jazz player. Not just so you can transpose on the gig, there are times when we need it on the gig. Mostly for singers. A singer will come in, she does the tune in a different key from what you learned it in. You got to be able to play it in that other key. And I think this is becoming a skill that's even more and more rare. Because now we have these apps that will transpose a lot of this stuff for you. I don't recommend that. I like the apps for what they are. Don't use them for stuff like that you can, use your brain for. It's always better to use your brain. All right? So, but now we're going to talk about why you should be transposing, right? Because it's more than just can you transpose on the gig. Okay, it's more than just having the skill to transpose. And I have two main reasons for you. The first reason is because you're cut off from almost all of the material if you can't transpose. Very rarely is stuff written out in every key for you. It's extremely rare. If you were to limit your jazz progress to just what's written out, there is no hope of being a great jazz player under those circumstances. There's no hope of that. The amount of material you need to consume to be a great jazz player, it's like you got to eat jazz material the way elephants eat. I read somewhere that elephants eat up to 600 pounds of food a day. You need to eat like that. You need to consume jazz material in huge volumes like that. And if all you're going to do is read it in the key that you have it in, that's not going to help you because, you know, as a side comment, I remember a long time ago, someone was arguing, why do they teach jazz improvisation in the universities when there are other forms of improvisation? Now remember, I'm a multi-genre trumpet player. I know precisely what that person is talking about. Yes, there's improvisation in other fields, in other genres, other styles. Jazz is harder. If you can, technically speaking, if you can improvise in jazz, you can improvise in any context. That's why it's taught in the universities. Jazz is just harder. And one of the things that makes it harder is that a single tune will go through multiple key changes, right? Um, so most tunes, by the way, have at least two keys in them. Sometimes the second key will be just a short bit, but it's still got that short bit. Other times you could have tunes like uh, Stella by Starlight. Stella by Starlight changes, I forget what the number is. It's like 5 or 6 different keys in there. Knowing that you have 12 major keys to choose from, this has 6 of the 12, right? So, and you have to be a great jazz player, you have to be fluent in all those keys to sound great on that tune. And there's other tunes that have a huge a huge number. I remember I used to document all this stuff, and I don't have it in my head right now. Um, there was one tune that I found that had 9 different key centers in it. If you want to be a great player on that tune, you have to master all 9 of those keys. And good luck finding material to do that with. Nicely pre-packaged material that you can just um, flip the page and casually learn that stuff. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Most of the material, if you're going to be a great, let's clarify that too. I'm talking about the ones that want to be great players, not the ones that want to just kind of do okay. And in fact, you know what? All the stuff that I teach, let's just make that assumption. I'm talking, now you can take what I'm saying and scale it down to your level, but I'm always talking to the guys that want to do well. You can just make that assumption that what I'm telling you here is for those guys that want to do the best that they could possibly do. And when it comes to um, the different key centers, there just isn't enough material out there. So if you can transpose, you can take one lick that you took from somebody's transcription, and you can play it in all 12 keys. Now you have access to the technique that it takes to play in those kind of tunes that have as many as 9 different tonal centers. So that's the first reason. It's just the amount of material that you need. I use it as an example, and I don't mind people buying my books, right? Um, the tonalization studies, right? I like that people are buying those. It's a good thing that people are buying those. But when I first started doing those myself, they weren't written down. And in fact, writing it out for the students has taken me years to get to. And I do write it out for the students because, like I said, it's like pulling teeth trying to get them to do this stuff without having to read it. Right? So I thought when I put those books on the market that they weren't going to sell. Because I thought, what jazz player? Who would want to learn how to play jazz but wants the stuff written out for them? And apparently there's a lot of people that want those tonalization studies written out for them. And I don't get me wrong. Remember, I'm talking now to the guys that want to be the best of the best. You don't need all of it written out for you. And part of the point I was trying to make with the scales, right? All I have so far is one level of pentatonic. I have the pro level for the pentatonic. I've got all of the majors, and I have maybe 2 harmonic minors. That's just the tip of the iceberg for the scales that we have to know. And I do the tonalization studies on every single scale. Every scale. Melodic minor, harmonic minor, pentatonic, altered pentatonics, um, all of these different scales that I practice, and there's a long, long list of them. I run them all through those same patterns that you're doing with the tonalization studies. And I don't have them written out. All of it is up here. So yeah, that's the biggest thing right now is the fact that the material's not there. And it shouldn't be there. It would bankrupt you if the amount of material you need, if it was available, would cost a fortune to buy. So you need to learn how to transpose so that you have access to that material. That's number one. Number two is being able to transpose changes the way you think. And I like to tell people, in order to transpose correctly, you have to be a master of both keys. You have to master the key that you're reading, and then you have to master the key that you're playing. Now, that kind of doesn't apply to jazz, at least the way I teach jazz, because all of the material that we do, I tell my students to write it down in the key of C. That way it's not as confusing when you're going through the material again in another key. I mean, imagine that. Let's say you have a page of material that you want to go through in a different key. One of them is in F, one of them's in D flat, one of them's in G. If you have a whole page of different keys, it gets a little bit crazy trying to transpose all of that to one key. And that's part of how I teach the jazz, is that don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't transpose stuff into every key. I use that as an introduction to that figure, that lick, or whatever it is. That's not good enough. Okay, so the way I teach, we take all of the material that we've collected, and I am a firm believer that you should collect your own material. And when you collect it in the key of C. If it was originally in the key of G, F, A flat, whatever, transpose it to the key of C to simplify things later. But I believe in going through all of your material in one key at a time. That is the tonalization concept. There's the tonalization concept, and then there's the tonalization studies. The tonalization studies are scales. The tonalization concept is the concept that says the more time you spend in one key, the better you'll get at that key. If you play let's say a 2-5-1 lick in every key, you're learning the 2-5-1 lick, you're not learning the keys. So you take all of your material and you play in the one key first. Then you go back to the beginning of all your material and you do it again in the other key. And I do believe in also being very systematic about that. But anyway, what I was saying is, when I say you have to be a master of both keys, that's kind of not applicable to jazz, because we have that stuff written down in one key. So when I say that you have to be a master of both keys, I'm really talking about the classical transposition. Classical transposition is a little bit different because we've got a different key signature and then a different transposition, right? So it is a little bit more involved for the classical stuff. Lucky you, right? So I do think if you're going to learn one and you want to do both, then you should learn both of them at the same time. The classical way of transposition is a great way to learn to transpose, but it's not actually necessary. So aside from being a master of both keys, transposition changes the way you think, because now you understand the more you master transposition, the more you understand the relationship that the notes have to each other within each of the keys. Think about that, right? When you transpose, you're taking something, usually you already know it before you transpose it. Hopefully that's the case, right? Don't transpose something in the context of jazz before you learned it in that key first. I hope, all right? So, um, so yeah, when you take something that you already know and then apply it now to another key, all of those scale degrees, everything, all of the interval relationships and all that stuff, they get applied to that new key. And the more you do that, the more, you know what? I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I noticed in the early 90s that there was a lick in a certain key that I was doing just naturally. I wasn't trying to do it. It was just happening naturally. And one day I stopped and I did it again. It had, like in jam sessions and stuff like that, it was coming out and it was coming out and it was coming out. And it was cool sounding. So I stopped and one day and figured out what those notes were. What was it that I was doing? Because I didn't know. It was just coming out. And I analyzed it and I figured out what it was. I couldn't just turn that on in the other keys. Maybe other people can. I'm not that good, right? Maybe more natural players can do that. I couldn't do that. Not with the lick that. There's some things I can do that with, but not with that lick. It was too angular. It was had too many intervals in it. I couldn't just like automatically switch it to another key. So I went through this process of first, see when I have a new lick that I'm doing, I always do it in every key first, right? Just the same way as everybody always says. I just don't stop there. I hope that's clear what I'm saying. It's not so much that I don't like that. People saying do it in every key. Well, yes, I did that for a long, long time. It didn't help. It gave me technique and nothing here. Okay? That's what I say about that. It gives you beautiful technique, but nothing here. And so first thing I did, and always do, is transpose this stuff through all the keys. That way you get the feel of the lick. But that's not enough to get it into your improv. Now I add it to that growing notebook. Back then it was a notebook, right? I write it in my notebook in the key of C, and it originally was not in the key of C. I transposed it to the key of C, and now it's part of this. So I start at the beginning of the notebook, go to the end of the notebook. I'm still doing this today. Start at the beginning of the end notebook, go to the end, beginning to end, over and over again, up a half step each time, up a half step, up a half step. And wouldn't you know, within a year, I was playing that lick that was just coming out naturally in one key. I was playing it now in every key. Not because I transposed it to every key, but because I put it in that cycle of transposition. It's not, that's what I'm trying to say. It's not enough to just transpose something to every key like that, right? That's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not going to help you. Because when you do that, you get finger technique. But you don't get the brains that goes with it. And once again, I'm going to say one more time, I do both. When I get a new lick, I take it through all the keys. Because that helps you hear the lick. That's not for the purpose of the keys, that's the purpose of learning to hear the lick. okay? You learn the lick when you do it that way. You don't learn to play in the key. Then you put it in your notebook and you go through it, through the whole notebook. Now, each of the things that are in the notebook, you repeat 10 times if it's not comfortable. If it is comfortable, you can get by with 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 reps, and then you move on. So the old stuff, the stuff that I used to practice in the early 90s, when I get to that, and I did it last night, when I get to that, it's just boom, you go through it and it's over, right? You just play each one of them a few times and it's done. The other stuff kind of bogs down, the new stuff, because you got to play it over and over again so that it becomes natural. And I can tell you more about that stuff maybe in another video. What we're emphasizing here is that when you do transpose, it gives you a more clear picture. And I'm not talking about the kind of transposition I'm talking about is when you do one key for a long time without having everything written out for you. That's the kind of transposition I'm talking about. And yes, doing something in every key, that's fine too. That gives you skill. That gives you transposition skill. But when you spend time playing all the material you have in one key, that's going to go a long way towards helping you master that key. And when I say master, I'm talking about the way you think about that key. And that's what I said. This number 2 is transposition changes the way you think about the key. It changes the way you think in the key. It's no longer a sequence of fingerings. You're actually thinking. You're actually speaking that language. Now, before I close this, let me tell you a little bit how to transpose. Okay? And the most important thing is to change the key signature in your head. That's the most important thing. So if you're transposing, let's say all your stuff is written out in C like I told you, and you're transposing hypothetically to E flat. Change the key signature in your head to 3 flats. Now the next thing you need to know is what scale degrees correspond. Okay? Now we know that E flat is up a third. If we change the key signature, we don't have to count half steps, right? That's why we change the key signature in our head, is so that we don't have to count half steps. All you have to do is visualize the note that's a third above the other note. Okay? Now, if there are accidentals, you have to apply the accidental. That's another powerful part of this. So when you see a third, and this is where, I said earlier, it changes the way you think. You have to actually recognize that it's a third to do this. If you see a third in the key of E, which in the key of C, which is an E, you have to now know that it's a third in the key of E flat, which is a G. And each one of the scale steps has to correspond like that. I hope that makes sense. So, and that's what makes it so slow going at the beginning, because your mind is doing so much at the beginning. Your mind is making so many calculations that it's never made before. Another benefit of doing transposition is just that it does sharpen your mind. This is not a musical benefit. This is a holistic human benefit. When you transpose, you're taking your thoughts to a superhuman level. Supernatural is the word I meant to say. You're now playing at a supernatural level. I still have to make that book. Someone asked, when is my book coming out? I said, which book? I've got dozens of books coming out. He says, your book about supernatural trumpet playing. I said, I just mentioned that. It was one of our Q&As. If you haven't been to our Q&A on Friday afternoons, please join us. We have a Q&A 5 o'clock on Fridays, Houston time. And so someone said, when is your book coming out? And I had just mentioned it, that maybe that I was talking about supernatural trumpet playing, and I said that sounds like a great title for a book. And he says, when is that book coming out? And actually, I actually started it, and then I stopped working on it, um, because it is a great idea for a book, a good title, and wonderful subject, because great trumpet playing is supernatural. If you understand what it means to be supernatural, over and above what's natural, and great trumpet playing is always supernatural. All right. So yes, the way you learn how to transpose is you recognize the relationship that the individual notes have to the key. Then you apply that relationship to the transposition. And it gets a little easier if you know more theory. If you see that the thing, so let's say C, E, G, E, C, F, A, right? You can see that that's a 1 chord and a 4 chord. So when you go to E flat, G, B flat, E, G, B flat, E flat, G, B flat, E, G, E flat, A flat, C, right? You can transpose that way because you understand the structure of the harmony. So the more of that you have, the easier it is. But then again, the transposition can help you with that. I hope that helps. Anyway, so that's, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to ask. I know the transposition is humbling, sometimes humiliating. It's not as fun because you're not as good at it. But let me tell you, there's very few things that are as fun as being on the gig and being the only one that can play that part. That happened to me not long ago. I played a part that was in F trumpet, and uh, they almost put the tune away because they saw that it was an F trumpet part. And I said, hey, no problem, I can transpose. And I'll tell you what, that's fun. That's a different kind of fun, but that's fun. All right. Anyway, if you have questions, ask. Other than that, God bless you. We will see you on the next video.